Addiction is the tip of the iceberg of all negative habits, keeping us slaves to a comfortable illusion, or on board a hopelessness Titanic. Coping mechanisms keeping us asleep to a reality we will have to awaken to sooner or later. The longer it takes, the darker the path becomes. Break it now. Make it your life goal. Hi, I'm Lena, and welcome to a new episode of WeMEN, where I explore finding truth, balance, and grace for all the lovely ladies out there. If you're young or feeling lost in this big life, I gotcha. I publish on the 1st and 15th of every month. As we've talked about healing previously, it's important we tackle the specific issue of addiction. The lovely Encyclopedia Britannica defines addiction as the physical or psychological need for a substance or behavior that is physically, psychologically, or socially harmful. It is often extremely difficult to cease the use of the substance or to cease repeating the behavior despite knowing that it has detrimental consequences. Addiction is much wider than what we usually think of. It's obviously about substances, including narcotics, alcohol, nicotine for smoking, but it also includes foods, and particularly sugar, which triggers the same mechanism with dopamine, is too widely available nowadays. Our ancestors and humans prior to our modern days did not have access to so much glucose in their food. There was a natural restriction to the consumption of sugar, which has nowadays vanished. And this restriction was important because sugar is necessary for our cells to function, yet there's a specific quantity that is needed. And because it is so much vital for our cells, there is a specific craving that has developed for humans to find sweet food in nature, to find food that will have some glucose that could be consumed in nature, which would be berries and fruits mainly. But obviously they were not so easy to reach. And nowadays you can grab a chocolate bar on your way to work. This new environment has allowed us to abuse this survival mechanism by wanting more and more sugar. And it doesn't stop there because behaviors can also be addictive. They are gambling, pornography, shopping, sex, and interacting or scrolling on social media. What all of those have in common is the instant pleasure that it gives. What's even more dangerous with those particular behaviors is that a lot of people don't necessarily see them that way. And this is why we are all concerned about it, because you and I have consumed sugar in our life and are probably consuming too much sugar if it's only that. But probably we are also concerned, at least with social media. A lot of people are concerned with sex and pornography. And again, when we talk about addiction, it is in the definition of addiction that it is harmful physically, psychologically, or socially. And this is why everyone should evaluate where they stand and where they want to be going forward. I wanted to do a specific episode about addiction following my previous episode on healing, because I do believe that you can develop addictive behaviors, although you have worked on yourself and you have worked to liberate yourself from your past. I know that for having experienced that since I went through the healing process. But, I am still consuming sugar and I'm still struggling with social media. And so today I want us to understand why we could develop addiction and why most of us have developed addictions, give you some examples, and more importantly, talk about the 3 areas of action to overcome our addiction. So everything goes back to the reward system. That means that behaviors that sustain our survival will induce the production of different neurotransmitters, which includes dopamine, a hormone responsible for pleasure. The more the activity or the substance is important for the survival, the more dopamine release we get, which we call dopamine rush. The release of dopamine is a continuous process that plays a role in learning, in attention, in mood, in movement, in sleep, and much more fundamental functions of our bodies. And I also want to highlight that it is not only dopamine, because a lot of people only focus on the dopamine, thinking that it's the only hormone that is responsible for the pleasure and therefore for the addiction process. It's a whole complex system. But it is true that dopamine has an important role and that we've been able to identify it as a major cause for inducing addictive behaviors, because it's a major cause of the pleasure feeling that we get from different activities. And so when you have dopamine rush, it has to calm down to the base level. It is helped by another hormone, serotonin, that is produced for contentment. They work in tandem. So when you eat and you're full, you are content. So you have this pleasure from dopamine, you also have this contentment from serotonin. It's a well-orchestrated ballet that also includes other chemicals, but since we are not biologists, it's easier for us to understand the big picture. And when you have an addictive substance coming into your body, it overstimulates the receptors for producing dopamine, which creates dopamine rushes that are so intense that they are believed to be followed by a significant drop below the base level. It would work a bit like insulin, if you're familiar with the problem of sugar, insulin, and diabetes, is that you get sugar peaks in your body that will react by producing a lot of insulin in a short period of time, because insulin helps absorbing the sugar in your blood. And since there is so much of it at once, it has to release a lot of insulin. But this process has also the consequence of inhibiting the sugar so quickly that there's a sudden drop in the glucose level in your blood, which is below the normal base, which will signal to your brain that you are below the survival level of glucose in your blood and that you should get more of it. And you see that you then start creating this cycle for sugar wanting, and it works the same with dopamine. The drop in dopamine creates blues and new urges for more. The more you get into that cycle, the more quantity you need to get the same high peak that you experienced before and raise again above the drop that you've experienced. There's a very sad and accurate video of a bird about drug consumption, which features a lovely bird that I will link down in the description. Very simple mechanism. Although we do not understand every part of it, we believe this is the way addiction works, and it does make sense. Now, we understand that addiction is, in a sense, the abuse of our reward system. We also need to understand where it comes from, because for most people, the first conception of an addictive substance, of a behavior, is usually voluntary, except when there is family or parents involved in abusing children and giving them drugs or alcohol. But usually what happens is that for most people, it comes from peers. So we are at parties, we are with friends, and there you can find drugs, alcohol, smoking. There is a sense of being cool or being more at ease with other people, which often occurs in high school. Although I must say, I have seen, specifically in poorer countries like in Eastern Europe, that is renowned for the alcohol consumption, in particular, is a peer sharing experience. But there is a mix of common despair in that, in knowing their situation and not being able to get out of it, which is really tragic. And there's also a history of political pressure in the East. Under the USSR regime, especially if you were young and you were not willing to participate in the drinking session with others, could mean you were spying on others. And so there were some political, even life-threatening implications of refusing to take part of a common experience that would involve alcohol or other substance abuse. That's one part, the social incitement. The other part is also coping with life, and more importantly, coping with life experiences such as abuse, loss, anxiety, any stress, and the want to forget just for one moment the troubles that you have around you. It almost becomes a survival tool. It really becomes a painkiller for some people. And then for others, it's a way of killing loneliness, killing boredom. I'm thinking especially about porn, gambling, social media, sometimes alcohol too. They don't know what they could do. They've been given those tools, it's just easy to access, and now they don't know what they could do. And it also makes them feel like they're living something or like they're connecting to others, although they not really. But again, they create illusions, they create ease, they bring a positive feeling into people's life. You see, the origins of addiction vary. Some are tragic, some are simply foolish, but in the end, there is something missing for everyone. And this void is filled with this substance and behavior that, at least just for a moment, makes us feel something positive. Stories of overdoses and drug abuse, alcoholism are so random if you think about it among celebrities. Famously, Amy Winehouse, Janis Joplin, Whitney Houston, Kurt Cobain. It's even a normality in some subcultures like rock. I remember seeing Mick Jagger super high a couple of years ago, and he was already 70. Also, Guns N' Roses super high on whatever they were on, and you could see them leaving the stage just to probably consume something and come out. And also I remember seeing Jake Buck being completely in his word on stage. It's interesting because you can see people being affected, and it's normalized in those industries to consume different substances. But there are two particular cases that came across very recently. We had Matthew Perry last year on October 2023 that died from a ketamine overdose, I believe, which was first prescribed to him to treat his depression. But he began to use substances in 1997, apparently after a jet ski accident when he was given painkillers. And he was already 3 years into France and had grown his fame very quickly, just like the other members. But he talked a lot about his journey, which is why it's an interesting case, because he's been quite open about it. He said the fame and the attention were not enough. He felt loneliness, he was caring for what people were thinking. Overall, he lacked self-esteem. And you see, he went to rehab and he seemed to have recovered and was willing to talk about it and inform people and help people get out of alcoholism. But it was not enough, and he did die despite the rehab, despite the awareness about his condition. And I think one major thing that comes out of his story is that there was an underlying issue of self-worth, self-esteem that he had with himself, and that fame and money and attention could not bring to him. I saw the same thing with another celebrity, singer Liam Payne, which tragically died last October, 1 year after Matthew, falling from his balcony in a foreign country. And the hotel said that alcohol and drugs were found in the room, and that they had a guest, that is probably him, that was behaving very aggressively and that was seemingly under the influence of some substances. And again, his case is also enlightening because he also talked openly about his addiction. He shared about being in rehab for almost a third of last year. He said 100 days in 2023. He seemed to be fine after rehab, and he mentioned that he used alcohol very early in his career to cope with fame and process his feelings, especially because he got anxiety and agoraphobia from his experience in the One Direction band. And he also mentioned that he had a son and that he could not take the same chances, and yet there's something that apparently he couldn't cope with. But it overall seems too similar to Matthew and to probably a lot of other celebrities and non-celebrities, because there are so many people that are not famous that are around us even. I believe we all know someone who's had deep troubles with substance abuse. I know someone in my family who died of alcoholism. I know parents who lost their 19-year-old teenager to drug abuse. We all have, and I do have, a lifelong smoker in my family. The more I am informed on this subject, the more I see less obvious addictions that I mentioned earlier. And I also realized that I've also been engaged in those. For me, it was particularly sugar and social media. Sugar is probably like a lot of people from my childhood, as I always had sugar for breakfast and I couldn't skip dessert. And that's actually how I realized that I probably have a problem with sugar. Although I'm full, I cannot skip my dessert. And for social media, I think it developed during college as I was under a lot of pressure. I had a lot of stress on myself. I wanted to do things really well and being perfect in my work. I was burnt out and also quite lonely. So it was a way to occupy myself. I thought I was simply relaxing, but then you spend hours and hours and you lose all the skills. You lose memory, you lose social skills, obviously. You lose time to develop more interesting skills. For me, that's when I realized I have something to do. In overcoming anything, the first thing is to admit where you stand. Overcoming any addiction is not an easy task. Harvard University has great resources on their website. It's not necessarily a matter of days. Some people are able to cut it off and forever, but a lot of people will struggle with it a couple of years before they are able to feel free and to go on with their lives. But it is possible, and as with everything, it requires you to be involved. It requires a decision from yourself, because no one will ever be able to make that decision for you and to force you into overcoming anything, including addictions. And to be very clear, I think there are 3 areas that are under your control and that you can influence to overcome your addictions. They are mindset, practical action, and the people. First, the mindset. As I mentioned, you have to come to a stage of acknowledgement, of admitting where you are and that what you are engaging in is detrimental to your health and to your life. I also believe from the examples I gave you, there is a big underlying issue of self-confidence, self-worth. That was the underlying root of the behavior. Even though they were for some time able to get clear from drinking or from abusing drugs following rehab, they fell again. And that's because the underlying cause is not addressed. And to address it, you have to go through a deep healing. This deep healing allows you to become responsible, to become brave, and to understand you're not a victim. You're not supposed to please people. You're not a bad person. You're simply the consequence of your choice, and you are in control of everything that comes out of your heart and your mouth. And I really deeply encourage you to go through this healing process, which I have talked about in my previous episode 6. I think it's the most important thing that you will ever do. And following that healing, you will be so much stronger that even if you face some relapses in eating too much sugar or social media, it will not have the same grasp on you, because I am on the other side and I clearly see that although I do have moments of engaging in those detrimental behaviors, they are never reaching a point where I lose myself and I lose control and I lose self-worth. This is the most important thing you have to build. Gratitude. It goes hand in hand together, as gratitude will slowly but surely allow you to enjoy the small things in life, which are life. Small things are your entire life. There's nothing more to life. That's when you understand that you can fully enjoy yourself, enjoy your life, and create beauty around you. Gratitude is hard to have when you are in this depressed position, but you have to force it upon yourself. And I've made a bonus episode about this. It's my first bonus episode. It is so effective and it is so needed in this age and in this world. And the last thing that you have to get in your mindset is to set a specific date. And I have a story about this, which is not exactly related to addiction, but it really illustrates the power of your mind. I decided 2 years ago that I wanted to do a detox for my body, looking at this sugar cravings I was having and the sugar consumption I was continuing to have, although I reduced it. I wanted to do a 10-day fasting to clean my entire body. Before I did that, I had already attempted to do 3-day fasting a long time ago. And I remember it was a pain because I was simply lying in my bed for 3 days as if I was dying. But here I decided that I would do 10 days and I was working as a waitress at the same time. And I specifically set a date when I would start and when I would finish the fasting. I set it a couple of weeks before it started. And when it started, I just obeyed. I just obeyed my decision and I didn't eat. First day was a bit uncomfortable, but believe me, the 9 following days, I did not feel hunger. I did feel more tired, but as I was working and as I was being active, I did not feel pain during those 10 days. And I even found myself having so much time because I didn't have to eat 3 times a day that I was doing even more things than I expected. And it was easier than I thought it would be because I had decided that it will happen on a specific time and my body just obeyed. So that's why it's important that you set a date to act your decision. The second area is the actual action. There are 3 main actions. Obviously, the first is to stop, but there are different ways to stop. You either completely stop the behavior with no specific time limit, or you gradually increase the time limit. So for example, you set for yourself to stop during 3 days. Then you set a week. Then you set 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, then a month, then 2, so that your mind is slowly taken to this endless period of time where you no longer engage in the behaviors. So that's the question of time. And there's also the question of the trigger. Some people will be more stimulated to stop when they see the trigger or when they completely abstain. So they have a conscious fight. For example, for my mom, she was smoking for many years. And then one day she decided it had to be over. And she put a cigarette pack on the table. She would see every day and she would consciously choose not to touch it. And it worked for her. For me, when I was eating cookies all day and at breakfast and at night, it was easier to remove it all, to not have the temptation around me and to replace them with substitutes. And so that's the second thing. First, you stop, and then you also choose an activity for when you're triggered. It should be something that is not too engaging, that does not require too much effort, but that is still a bit rewarding. For example, it could be crosswords or Sudoku, as they allow you to focus your mind on something else when you have the cravings. I believe that's kind of what also happened when I was fasting, meaning that I was focusing on something else and I didn't feel hunger. So when you set your date, also choose a small activity that you can easily engage in anywhere when you feel the urge and the craving. And then the third action you should take is to spend time alone every day, not doing anything. It could be meditating, it could be simply thinking about everything and anything, even if it's hard. Even better is to have all of this while walking in nature. This time allows your body to reset. Get used to this state of being where you are supposed to be bored and you are supposed to be contemplating sometimes. This is what you need when you've been overstimulating with dopamine and with drugs. More specifically for sugar, I have used substitutes such as nuts, fruits, those rice crackers with some chocolate. They look like they are cookies, but there's nothing in it. It's just rice and some chocolate. You can slowly move to making your own smoothies. You can also simply drink herbal tea. And at first, you might be needing to consume quite a lot of them. But after some time, it just goes away step by step, coming to the point where you enjoy the process of cooking meals and you shift your cravings towards healthy cravings. That's for sugar. And for social media, it has to be more radical because honestly, it's just too easy to get lost in it. So you either try what a lot of people recommend, like a 30-day detox where you remove your apps, or set time limits and limit the number of accounts that you follow to people that inspire you and that bring you motivation. That's a good transition to the third area, which is people. People are important because they are part of the trigger. They are usually the number one cause of why we are addicted to anything. If you are in a severe case of addiction, you have to get help, medical assistance. But even if you're not, it's important to share your struggles with other people, to find a community even of people who have the same struggle. That's why they say that the Alcoholic Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Smokers Anonymous, I'm sure there are lots of them, are quite effective because you all have different stories, but you all have the same struggle, and sharing it really sheds a new light on your life, on your journey. More often than not, it opens your eyes and brings solutions and gives you strength. This goes hand in hand with distancing as much as possible from the negative influences in your life, from the people who got you into those addictive habits, who are keeping you in them and who add no value to your life, who pull you down and who only take time and energy out of you. If it's not possible to completely distance yourself, to detach yourself emotionally, at the end of the day, our behaviors, our choices, and sometimes they get out of control. And a lot of times it is linked to our perception of ourselves, feeling like we do not deserve to have this control because we are not worth it. We are not strong enough. We are not smart enough. We are not pretty enough. We are not lovable. And there's a big lack of self-worth, self-confidence that I believe is the fundamental underlying cause of a lot of addictions. And if anything, it should be our primary focus in life, to get back our self-worth and to work on real confidence every day. Even once we understand our value, showing up, showing gratitude, showing confidence, our daily practices. I want to cover confidence in a special episode. It will be a bonus episode that will be short, to the point, of what is confidence and how to practice it daily so that you can walk in life with no regrets. This is what it's all about, living fully and dying proudly.